When the Davenport, Iowa high school debate team won the state championship in 1934, one of its team members was Malvin Lloyd Hansen, a farm boy with an obvious gift of gab. The farm background and the gift for telling a story launched a career for Mal Hansen, which took him to Nebraska, where he became a nationally known farm broadcaster and Peabody Award winner, among other honors. Tonight, it brings him to us as a newly named member of the Nebraska Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame. Mal was a debate coach while earning his master's degree at the University of Iowa when he first sat down before a microphone. Was he nervous?
I don't believe I was nervous because I didn't know what I was doing. But we were running a forum program, and we had students that would come to WSUI, and they would sit down with me, and we discussed topics of the day. We settled all the world problems at that forum, and I was really probably more interested in what we were talking about than what was happening on the radio. My only concern was that I wanted to be sure that 55 miles away my folks could hear me.
Mal Hansen started at WHO Radio as assistant farm director and moved to KSO KRNT as farm editor before World War II found him serving in the Navy as a communications officer. At war's end, he accepted a job in 1946 as farm director at WOW Radio in Omaha and launched his Nebraska broadcast career. In his early years at WOW, Mal Hansen led one of the first large group travel delegations to Europe after World War II, studying the food situation and progress of the Marshall Plan. He originated radio programs from 6 European countries and began a long series of farm study tours which covered 5 continents, with thousands of Midwest people participating. Mal recalls some of the highlights of those trips.
It started because a man came to me who was just opening a travel agency, and he said, Mal, how would you like a free trip to Europe? And he said, I said, well, that sounds interesting to me. He said, well, if you could get 15 people to go with you, you could have a free trip. Well, I went to Johnny Gillen, the manager of the station, and I said, here's the deal. What do you think about it? We could do broadcasts from Europe because the Marshall Plan was just coming in, and it was a big news item. How effective is the Marshall Plan? So Johnny Gillen bought the idea. We really got 28 people to go to Europe, and we spent about 30 days in Europe studying the Marshall Plan. We had farmers with us, all farmers. They went to the farms in Europe, including Denmark and France, Germany, Netherlands, and they actually lived on farms over there. In the meantime, I did broadcasts. It's rather interesting that we went over there and used the government broadcast facilities.
Mal was a frequent guest on the NBC National Farm and Home Hour, with segments originating from Omaha. Later, he commuted to Chicago for 13 weeks as farm commentator on NBC's Today on the Farm with Eddie Arnold. Did this network exposure ever get Mal to thinking about abandoning our North 40 for a network career?
Yes, I was tempted because at one time it came to me, the advertising agency that handled the Alice Chalmers account with NBC, and they said, we'd like to have you join the staff in Chicago. Well, at that time, I gave it considerable thought, but here I was with 4 children, young children, living in Omaha, and it came to my mind that Chicago was not the best place to raise a family with 4 kids, and I gave it up and stayed right here.
WOW-TV went on the air at noon, August 29, 1949, as the first television station in this 5-state area. 10 minutes later, Mal Hansen showed up in the living rooms of the few folks around here with TV sets with his first TV farm reporter program. Tell us about that first day, Mal.
It was a near disaster. I decided that first feature should be a big one, an important one, so I went to the Iowa State Fair. I carried a Bolex camera with me, and I shot quite a bit of material. I brought it back to the station, and they said, well, sorry, we'll run the film through, but you have to do your own editing. Well, I had really no experience in editing film, and so I put the film together as best I could. Well, we got the film on the air. It started out, and you know, it was terrible because the film broke about the middle. And of course, they hadn't been much experience in repairing broken film. And the net result was that I had about 3 minutes of dead time with no film to show, and I tried to fill in. So I remember that very well, and it was pretty close to being a disaster. But on the other hand, I didn't worry too much because we didn't have many sets. Not many people were watching.
Those were the days of original programming for local stations, with the network coaxial cable still snaking its way westward. And Mal was soon doing a weekly 8 p.m. program in your own backyard. The program was introduced by a young staff announcer known as Johnny Carson. Mal talks about working with Carson.
Well, Johnny was a great guy to work with. He was an extremely hard worker, and he was always well prepared. But on the other hand, you couldn't always depend upon what he was going to do next. I vividly remember one experience with that program in your own backyard. We had a beautiful setting. I had a Brittany Spaniel dog that walked in and out of the set, and it was a good show, I thought. Johnny Carson was we didn't call him Johnny at that time. He was still John Carson. John Carson was the staff announcer. Well, he was in the announce booth. I was out in the set ready to do my program at 8 o'clock. I thought it was 8 o'clock. Johnny introduced the show. He said, "There's Mal Hansen in his own backyard." I started the show. In the meantime, Johnny comes out of the announce booth. He comes between me and the camera setting, and he walks right across the set and goes over to a kitchen. There was a lady by the name of Martha Bolson at that time in the kitchen that was always putting on homemaker shows. And he went to the cupboards of the kitchen, and then he started to pull out pots and pans and drop them on the floor, and he started to swear. Well, of course, I thought I was on the air, and I blew up. Then he yelled, "Mal, that's all right." He said, "I just set the clocks ahead 10 minutes.
Mal later developed a TV farm short course program for the winter months, featuring extension specialists from the University of Nebraska and Iowa State. That program ran for 2 hours. Obviously, there was still no network link. Later, Hansen created a weekly feature called Farm Family of the Week, which continued for more than 30 years, hosted in later years by Arnold Peterson and then Bryce Anderson. It was not uncommon for sons and grandsons of original farm families to be featured on that program. Mal recalls some of those families.
Well, the Farm Family of the Week was sort of started because we had a rural homemaker program of the week on radio. And I thought, well, that was very successful. We had rural homemakers from all the area, and we used them once a week, different persons. So I thought, well, why not a Farm Family of the Week? So we decided we would have a Farm Family of the Week. The requirements were that they had to be good farmers, they had to be active in the community, and have a family. And we got county agents and FFA instructors, vocational agriculture instructors, to help us out with names, and we put them on the air once a week. We went out and took pictures of the farms, we took pictures of the family and sent them to the local paper so everybody would know they were on. And now, you know, I've had the experience of having people come up to me and say, well, I was on your Farm Family of the Week. I was 10 years old. And I've also discovered that on occasion, people that end their obituaries will put in they were members of the Farm Family of the Week on WOW television.
Most of those farm families were, of course, early risers, and Mal Hansen's appeal, among other reasons, was a strong voice for those early morning chores. One farmer told Mal he listened to Mal Hansen because his voice carried over the sound of the milking machines in those sleepy early morning hours. But Mal's voice carried much farther than Nebraska and Iowa milking barns. Once called the most popular farm director in the country, Mal served as president of the National Association of Television and Radio Farm Directors, and as a member of the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture's Advisory Committee, among other national and regional honors. But the feather in his Seed Corn Company cap had to be the Peabody Award he won for producing a program called Regimented Raindrops.
Well, in the 50s, soil conservation and water conservation were pretty important because we were realizing at that stage of our time that we needed to save the soil and save the water. So we started a series of radio shows in which we promoted soil conservation, and at the same time we did the radio shows, we had the TV camera crew with me, and we did a lot of work on terracing, on contouring, on dam building, and eventually developed 2 programs. The first one we called Regimented Raindrops 1, and that was a 52-minute movie that we put together. Discovered that was too long. Nobody wanted to watch it for 52 minutes, and we couldn't use it on television. So Regimented Raindrops 2 was developed, only 27 minutes, and it showed, for instance, some of the very first overhead irrigation system that was used in this part of the country. It became very important because it was shown thousands of times and eventually led to the Peabody Award.
Major news events frequently provide broadcasters with an opportunity to offer a public service as well as report the story. In 1949, major blizzards created havoc among western Nebraska cattle herds, with ranchers and farmers unable to get to their livestock with feed. Military aircraft were used to dump hay bales for the starving cattle in what was called Operation Haylift. Mal Hansen was on one of those flights. He interviewed crew members as well as making this report for radio.
Well, you probably hear the bell in the background. That's the signal from the pilot, maybe you call it the bombardier, of the plane that we are riding in. You've heard much about the haylift operation. Well, this haylift operation is really right before us now. We're seeing men of the 10th Air Force deliver hay to livestock. There's plenty of activity here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 men working, including Harold Storm of radio station WOW, as they push down the hay. The reason the bell is ringing is that there's plenty of livestock right below us that need the hay, and they keep on pushing that hay out as so long as the bell rings. Now the bell stops, and they had one bale of hay half in, half out. Fortunately, it was more in than it was out, so they pulled the hay bale back from the entrance to this C-47 that we are riding in.
Mal's many years of touring with farmers led him eventually to the travel industry full-time. He left WOW Radio and Television in 1958 to join Travel and Transport Company as Director of Tours. In 1971, he became president of the company and now holds the designation of Chairman Emeritus. His TV experience is still being put to use as a volunteer with SCORE, the Service Corps of Retired Executives. Mal has helped to develop 3 video programs focusing on small-town survival. These are being sold and viewed nationally as a funding source for the SCORE organization. Mal and wife Millie have been married for 58 years. They are parents of 4 children. There are 9 grandchildren, and their first great-grandchild is expected soon. The Nebraska Broadcasters Association is proud to welcome pioneer farm broadcaster Mal Hansen to its Hall of Fame, a traveling man who nevertheless, long ago, chose to make our state home.